Could you tell us a little bit about Astia and what you guys do?
Absolutely. Astia is the premier organization for women-led, high-growth companies. High growth, we mean the next innovators. High-tech, clean-tech, life science companies that have a woman in the founding team or a position of influence and equity.
And you guys have just started into Europe now because you're primarily a US-focused business. What have you been doing in the US?
We've, for the past 10 years, worked with women-led companies on 3 fronts. One is access to capital. Number 2 is about achieving the high growth that capital is going to require. And the third is developing the leadership of the founding team. The entire reason that we were set up was that the percentage of venture capital that goes into women-founded companies is disproportionate to the number of women entrepreneurs. And I'll give you some numbers that you can consider. In the US today, 3% of venture capital goes to women CEOs, and another 5% goes to women founders. And the common response to those poor percentages is, well, women maybe aren't pursuing entrepreneurial endeavors, and the numbers don't bear that out as well. 51% of startups in the US last year were women-led. If you look at MBA programs where women are participating at fabulous numbers in the US, nearly 51% of business school applicants last year were women. And so we could think that the time is right for an Astia, and the time is right for women within the high-growth sector.
How do you select companies to join Astia? What are the criteria and what's the process?
The Astia selection process is much like an investor selection process, except that we have a rich set of relationships that lead to a more diverse deal flow, we believe. We take a look at companies' fundamentals. Is this an investable deal? Although, having said that, we do a lot of pipeline filling. So by the time a company has come to our program, they've had a lot of touch points with Astia. We may have seen them while they were writing their business plan, and we've helped map a successful roadmap there. And then they may come back to us when they're building out their team, and we may give them some guidance about what would do to make that an attractive, investable team. And then at the appropriate time, and it varies by company and by sector, companies fill out a comprehensive application at Astia, and we do a due diligence process, which I wouldn't equate to an investor due diligence process. Nonetheless, it's a deep dive on the team, the company, and the opportunity. And we look to the investor community at Astia and our C-suite, those CEOs, been there, done that, serial entrepreneurs, to take a look at the companies and tell us, are these companies the ones that we can work with? And are they the ones that can achieve results? Once you're selected, you're paired with been there, done that, investors, advisors, serial entrepreneurs, and industry thought leaders to ensure the success of the process with Astia.
What sort of success have Astia had in funding these companies?
Astia works with companies to achieve funding. However, we don't fund the companies, just to be clear. Having said that, we have an exceptional success rate. Greater than 60% of the companies who engage in Astia's program achieve funding or an exit within 1 year of that program. That's as compared to the broader market, where fewer than 1% of entrepreneurs achieve that same result.
Okay, so a lot of good selection. And you guys aren't a for-profit company. How does that work, and how are you funded, and how do you make your money?
The Astia model is actually a really interesting one, especially in today's business climate. We are completely a volunteer-based organization, except for the small, lean, mean staff I have. We have a staff of 10 that addresses 4 markets globally. We're in Silicon Valley, New York, London, and Bangalore. And what I'm able to achieve for our companies is all a result of the broader community or ecosystem that's committed to the mission of Astia. Everything that you experience as an entrepreneur at Astia is about the individuals involved and about the relationships that you build with those individuals, and that's how you subsequently get to the success rate that we have. At the end of the day, Astia is not this not-for-profit organization, but it's the broader community and ecosystem that surrounds that smaller organization to deliver results for the companies.
Cool. So you're funded by the ecosystem, or by companies that you invest in, or I mean, how does that whole thing work? Are you just linking investors with companies, or are you guys taking a cut? Or where does all that fit in?
We are primarily funded through sponsorships out of business development units, not the philanthropic arm often. So, for example, Microsoft sponsors us out of their emerging growth sector, which is Dana Lewin's group in Silicon Valley that cares about being near innovation and being near the next generation of innovators. So they sponsor us. Cisco, out of their business development unit. Morrison & Foerster, where we are today, is hosting the program because they recognize that the companies that Astia works with are exceptional. These are true leaders in their industry. They are, some of them, emerging, so they may be unknown within their sectors, but they also know that the success rate at Astia is a direct path to great deal flow. So that's one element of our funding. In addition, the companies do pay a small fee, but it's a fee for life. It's an on-ramping fee, and it is extremely below market because we like to be below market, but it is a fee nonetheless, so the companies properly commit to and engage in the process of building those relationships with the ecosystem.
You were talking about how many girls or women are going into MBAs. How many are actually starting companies?
That's a more difficult stat to track, so you have to actually cross-reference some data. You can look at the percentage of women in the biosciences, and in the US that's about 38% of the PhD students are women. Within software engineering, it's a fairly dismal percentage, it's around 21%. So we think we could do some work there to get more women on the high-tech computer science engineering side of things. Having said that, when we look at the companies that we find, what we've recognized is that women are out there starting companies that have the potential for high growth. They may just not have the networks that connect them to funding sources for that high growth. At the end of the day, there are two elements at play, we believe, for why women only see 3% of venture capital as CEOs and 5% as founders. The two fundamentals are, one, access to networks. This is a networks game. High growth business, the individual doesn't scale, and venture will tell you they invest in who they know. They like to invest in teams and who they know. And culturally and socially, still in the US and in Europe and in India, men and women are separate business networks. Astia works to break down those business networks, and when you go into our program, you see that we achieve a 50-50 ratio of men to women in the program. Number two is an aspirational component. There's some great statistics and research out there that show that men and women still self-assess differently. A woman in a calculus class, as an example, if she receives a C in a calculus class, she's most likely to self-assess that she's failed calculus. She may be likely to drop out of math as a major, and she won't use that course in the furtherance of her career. A young man in that same course, statistically speaking, will say that he's excellent at math. He's a super calculus wizard, and most likely he'll negotiate a higher salary and pursue a career subsequent and consistent with having been successful in math. You can imagine how that plays out in aspirations, in differing aspirations. We work with women within founding teams to ensure that they're properly self-assessing and to spend time validating both their business models and business metrics and their own personal abilities relative to those business opportunities. Two fundamentals, networks and self-assessment.
Do you think there could be more education? One of the things that's come up quite a lot is that through, it's an awareness thing, as you were saying, through the college education, university college education, through even the sort of younger schooling. Do you think there should be generally more awareness that people can get out and start companies, or do you think that that's just empowering too many people to do dangerous things?
Oh, I don't think entrepreneurship is dangerous, but I don't think it's for everyone. I do think that there's a way to inspire those who are inclined towards entrepreneurship. And I do think part of the work at Astia is to be a lighthouse or a megaphone of the successful women out there. I do think that something that I'm struck by is that you've probably not heard the name Diane Green. I encourage you to go out there and do a search on her name. She was the founder CEO of VMware, which subsequently was, I believe, the largest IPO in 2006. A name you should know. It's interesting to me that most people out of Silicon Valley don't know her name, and even within Silicon Valley don't know her name. I think some of the work at Astia is making sure that we really showcase and champion the success of those women so that the pipeline behind us sees the opportunity and sees the roadmap to entrepreneurship.
Carrot and stick. And in terms of yourself, how have you got involved with Astia? What's your history in the company?
If you read my bio, I always say that my journey has been a series of serendipitous events, and Astia is certainly that. My own background is public policy. I love to look at the numbers, I love to look at the data, and I love to address a problem. I specifically studied women's participation in markets, specifically emerging markets. It actually applies well to Silicon Valley as well. I worked for U.S. Senator and American Express prior to coming to Astia as a community member. I first was an advisor to a number of the companies, and when there was an executive change, I was approached and I joined the team as COO 4 years ago and became CEO 2 years ago. I'm actually friends with the founder, Kate Muther from Cisco Systems, and found her story to be inspirational. She was the CMO at the time that Cisco went public, and when she looked around the room to see who was participating in the public offering, she noticed that when women were disproportionately underrepresented within the ranks of those who achieved the results of that exit.
Okay, and then historically before that, previously, before the advising stuff, I mean, what really pushed you into, or inspired you, I suppose, to get into
I'm really a believer in women's full participation. And actually that's the vision of Astia. It's the notion of full participation. Women have been participating fantastically at the micro enterprise level. We hear about it all over the globe, Green Bank, and all the great micro enterprise projects where women have played extremely well. And lending microcredit has figured out that to lend to a woman is the same as getting your money back. And what I believe is women should be participant at all levels of the economic spectrum. And that includes wealth generation. And I'm looking forward to creating the next generation of innovators that generate real economic results for countries as well as for themselves. And that's where Astia looks to play. And I'm really inspired by that opportunity.
Okay, awesome. And any final things in terms of what can we see from you, expect to see from you in the next few years or even few months?
I've been very fortunate to oversee Astia's global growth. And what I look forward to in the next 5 years is linking our markets across borders. Entrepreneurs went global long ago. Investors right now are trying to figure out how are they going to pursue innovation across borders. Astia likewise looks forward to linking not just our entrepreneurs across markets, but our investor communities. Our investors in Silicon Valley that know the strength of our deal flow, our investors in New York, London, and now Bangalore, hopefully will become a global network for these women entrepreneurs to really encourage their continued growth and participation in markets.
Okay, excellent. Thanks a lot, Sharon.
Thank you.